Hey guys, what's up and welcome back. Wanted to discuss the Diablo 4 Season 4 PTR a bit and the changes to itemization. So, if you are familiar with my channel, when Diablo 4 first came out, I did a couple of videos about the beta and about preseason and Season 1. And basically, our impression of re-rolling specifically was that re-rolling in Diablo 4 was really, really bad. And it was bad mainly because they had, in the initial system, they had priority affixes which dictated re-rolls that you would always get on certain pieces of equipment. So, for example, if you re-rolled a ring and it didn't have critical strike chance on it, critical strike chance would always appear as one of your re-rolls. Or if you had a pair of gloves and attack speed didn't appear on it, attack speed would always be one of your re-rolls. And for rings with critical strike chance, that was pretty nice because that was an affix that you basically wanted. But for gloves, attack speed isn't relevant for Whirlwind with Barbarian, right? Whirlwind as a channeled skill doesn't benefit from attack speed. So anytime you were trying to roll gloves, you basically couldn't reroll your gloves properly in the previous system. So they took that feedback and they removed the priority affix system and just gave the same probability to any roll, which with the prior affix system, with the criticism of having conditional damage, like damage on Tuesdays is the joke, having all of those different random affixes, like on a chess piece, for example, there's 38 different affixes that could appear on a chess piece in the previous version of the game, right? So now we're more close to the Diablo 3 style system where we can see what the different types of rolls are, right? So if we go over here and we try to re-roll strength, for example, we click the button and it shows us the possible affixes that can go on this. And this is huge. This tells us everything that we need to know about re-rolling. This is the information that we need. So we can replace strength with a higher strength roll, or the other available fixes are max life, flat damage percent, attack speed, or a lucky hit chance for primary resource, right? And what's interesting about this is the conditional damage is not an option here, right? So where's like critical strike damage, damage to injured, all of those other damage types? Well, if I look at the vulnerable damage, now they appear, right? So the types of damage that I can get are the critical strike damage, overpower damage, vulnerable damage, or damage over time, right? So basically what's happening here is on the three affixes that you can get on a legendary, you cannot get a legendary that's got, for example, vulnerable damage, critical strike damage, and strength on it. That's not a possibility of something that you can roll because the slot for conditional damage, in this case vulnerable damage, that slot is the only slot that you can roll the conditional damage type on, right? Hope that makes sense, right? So if I look at like the life per hit and I look at the strength, right? These are basically allowing for the same exact rolls, right? In the case of strength, I can't roll life per hit because we already have life per hit. And in the case of life per hit, I can't roll strength because we already have strength. But you can easily see that the other affixes are the same, right? So I can either get max life, flat damage, attack speed, or the lucky hit chance, right? And then in the slot where I've already rolled conditional damage, in this slot I can roll other types of conditional damage, as well as the same type of conditional damage, which is vulnerable damage. The quality of life increase that this has, just from the perspective of you being able to understand what combination of rolls are possible on any one given piece of equipment, is absolutely massive. This quality of life change is just so huge I cannot begin to describe it, because in the previous version of Diablo 4, the only endgame systems to engage with are basically Helltide, Nightmare Dungeons for leveling your glyphs, and rerolling. That was it, right? They added more uber bosses and the farming of Uber Boss material and the fighting of Uber Bosses, specifically Duriel, to get the chance of getting the Uber unique that you want to target farm, right? But outside of the Uber Bosses, the game hasn't really changed that much. And now we have big changes to the core systems, and it's really the core systems that you're engaging with on a day-to-day basis that determine whether or not you can stomach sinking time into the game, right? So that's re-rolling, which is huge. The other major changes are obviously to the Codex of Power. We no longer have aspects as inventory items. So in the previous version, you could either imprint from the Codex, which was always a minimum roll, or you would have to save aspects as inventory items. There was a stash tab dedicated to it. They took up a lot of space in your inventory. I can flip back over to the base version of the game and take a look at my Eternal Realm characters, and we can see how much stash space I have dedicated to different aspects. Now it's much simpler. There's no extraction of aspects at the occultist. When you salvage, the legendary power immediately goes into the Codex of Power, and it saves whatever high roll of the legendary aspect that you salvage. So that's instantly better already. The UI is significantly better in terms of searching and organization of these things, right? These are all the class-specific aspects. So that's how the occultist has improved, right? The sigil system hasn't changed. It's the imprinting of aspects and the re-rolling of items at the occultist has gotten significantly better. And then the way these affixes work, right? So now we have, instead of upgrading at the smith, there's two types of upgrading. There's tempering and masterworking. Tempering, you basically get recipe books, right? These are the recipe books, and these recipe books, you basically add these affixes to an item, right? So we'll look at this sword, right? And then what kind of recipes can go on weapons? Well, we can add 2 categories to each item. Okay. And then the amulet's a good example because the amulet has access to all the different categories, right? So if we go through with the crafting for this and choose natural finesse, this can either roll flat damage, damage to CC'd enemies, damage to close, damage to distant. So here's all of the conditional affixes now. The conditional affixes are in this tempering system, right? So all of the different resistances, all of the different damage types, right? Different, like, plus to passives are in here. I'm not sure if plus to skills are in here anymore. Here's like the movement speed stuff, cooldown reduction, resource generation, resource cost reduction. So what happens here is, let's look at like a ring, right? So I rolled the world stability on this ring, and what I got was resource generation. And you can see the smith icon. That's the 4th stat that I got from resource generation. And then I can also add one of these damage types to this ring to get 5 total affixes. I believe I have 5 on this piece of equipment, right? So on this piece of equipment, I rolled 1 from the weapon category, and I rolled 1 from the offensive category, and got flat damage and berserking damage as the 4th and 5th roll on this thing. So basically, long story short here is, in the previous version of Diablo, you would have 4 affixes, and then you'd have a miserable experience in trying to re-roll one of the 4 affixes. Now, legendary items come with 3 affixes. The amount of affixes are greatly reduced. The re-rolling of an affix of those 3 is much clearer, and then you add on 2 additional affixes where you have some amount of control over what those specific affixes are going to be, right? So now you have control over 3 of the 5 affix slots, and you don't have to worry about inventory space for the legendary aspect power as well. So just in general, like the quality of life around itemization and the amount of stash space taken up by items is basically fixed. And, if you already enjoyed Diablo 4, but then disliked the general quality of life around itemization, this is obviously then a good update, right? So we don't see what the season mechanic is. I'm not a huge fan of seasons. I would rather play Eternal Realm. The only problem with that is, since the game's kind of open world in a sense, if you play on Eternal Realm, there's basically nobody there. So if you play on the season, you get all the people around you. You get people in the Hell Tides. It's much more engaging to play in the season. So I think the PTR is giving us the confidence we want to try Season 4. Now, the other thing that's cool about the PTR is you get instant access to all of the fully leveled glyphs. So they give you all of the level 21 glyphs. You get access to all of the Paragon points. You can play around with the Paragon board and do a full test of the Paragon board. You get all the skill points, so you can instantly do the skill tree. They basically instantly boost you to level 100, give you 925 items, right? Or 920. You get 2 random sets of 920 items. You get a bunch of the crafting manuals. You get all of the skill points, all of the Paragon node, all of the Paragon points, and all of the Paragon glyphs are leveled up to level 21. So you can basically screw around and experiment with builds. You can experiment with the endgame systems. You can go straight to the pit. You can do the Nightmare Dungeons. You can do Hell Tides. You can basically screw around, do whatever you want in the PTR. The premium content creators are basically also doing like testing and providing feedback or whatever. That's not really what we're using the PTR for. If we find a bug, we'll report it. But we're more or less interested to get a sneak peek at the crafting system and the enhancements to like re-rolling and stuff like that. So yeah, just in general, it's a lot better. I didn't talk about masterworking, but masterworking basically just replaces the 5 levels of upgrades that you would do before. Now it's like 12 levels of upgrades. The only place to get these masterworking mats is in the endgame pit, which is like greater rifts, and you can only masterwork something that's tempered. So first you have to add the additional affixes via tempering. Now I have a 5 affix item. Now it can be masterworked, and masterworking, just like it says, all affixes increased by 5%. You keep on doing that, and then every 4th rank 4, 8, and 12, gives a 20% boost to one of the stats as well. So it's 5 across the board for each level, and then level 4, 8, and 12, one of the 3 will randomly get a 20% boost. I don't know if you can keep boosting the same one or not. That the other content creators will figure that out. And it looks like you can also reset it in case you didn't like which one got the 20% boost. You can reset it and re-roll through the percentage upgrades, right? So the percentage upgrades aren't as exciting as control over the affixes. It's really about having a 5 out of 5 piece of equipment with good rolls. That's ultimately what matters. The only other thing worth mentioning is randomly some of the equipment will have a high roll. So does any of this have it? No, but I got one piece in the stash that does. Which one is it? So this one. So this one gets the Roman numeral 1 because it's got 1 juice to fix. The juice to fix gets a little star there, kind of like how the unique aspects had a different symbol for the unique aspect. Same here for an affix that has, I forget what they call this, but there's some terminology for the juice to fix, and it can have 1, 2, or 3 for the base affixes, right? So the affixes on this glove are the base affixes, and 1, 2, or 3 of them can get the in Last Epoch it's called Exalted. I forget what it's called here, but basically 1, 2, or 3 of the affixes can get 50% better ranges to it. So this strength roll, it's actually not saying what the roll for strength is supposed to be. 70 to 84, right? So what's 84 times 1.5? Is it always going to be a max roll? It might be. 84 times 1.5 is 126, okay? So it's really good to get max rolled strength, right? So strength can normally roll 70 to 84 on a top tier item. And then if you get the juiced roll on this, it's a max roll. There's no range indication, right? So it's not like, if this could potentially be a range, it would be 70 times 1.5 is 105. So if this could roll a range, it would roll 105 to 126, but they're just giving you the 126, which is cool. And then also in the end game, all monsters over level 95 are going to drop level 925 items. So basically, you no longer have to worry about item power in endgame. Everything you get is going to be 925, which means the weapons are all going to be at max DPS, right? And then you're just looking for weapons with 3 good affixes on it and 3 good juice affixes, or 2, and you can roll your 3rd easily, right? And then you can just keep on using the master working system, or the tempering system rather, and you have good control over the 4th and 5th affix. So yeah, that's how they've changed the game. The biggest problem I still have is with the glyphs. I don't think it's particularly compelling to level these glyphs to 21. What I would like to see is, in the previous version of the game, you had to get a glyph to level 15 to increase the radius size, which basically would enable the additional bonuses without having to worry about which board you socket the glyph into. I would like to see them lower that from level 15 to level 10 or something. It should just be way easier to level the glyphs, because doing Nightmare Dungeons sucks, and doing a lot of Nightmare Dungeons back to back to back, just leveling glyphs, is not that exciting. But at least now with the pit, we have something to do after hitting level 100. So in my 2 characters, my preseason Barb and my Season 1 Rogue, I didn't even get to level 100 because I was at a point where at level 93, level 95, really all I could do was Nightmare Dungeons and finish leveling up my glyphs. It wasn't that exciting. There wasn't anything else I was building up towards. The Uber bosses, Uber Lilith and Uber Doriel and all the other Uber bosses really weren't that exciting. Now they have a new carrot on a stick to chase, which is you just run through the pits, which are like greater rifts. The pits give you the materials to further upgrade your items. Whatever, it's something. Honestly, Diablo 4 compared to its competitors, Diablo 4 does not respect your time in a meaningful way. Like leveling a character to 100, getting all the skill points, getting all the Paragon points, getting all the Paragon glyphs to level 21. That portion of the process has never respected your time. And then there was like no ability to do multiple different builds, experiment with different builds, because of the way that aspects took up inventory space and the cost of respecking, re-gearing, having the right types of for a fixed gear for different types of builds. Like if you had a damage over time build, if you were trying to play like Bleed versus Whirlwind versus like Overpower Hoda, that required 3 different types of gear basically, right? So having all that different type of gear was terrible. Now you can just like retemper items. So like the base 3 affixes that you get on gear, and then you have flexibility in the 4th and 5th slot to change those up. Great, you can keep reusing your gear. Changing the aspects is now not a problem. You don't have to hoard high-rolled aspects in your inventory. Once you get one good high-rolled aspect, you've got it forever. You can just keep reprinting it. Now you're constrained by mats. I got a guy here in the chat. He's complaining about Veiled Crystal farming to build experiment. Yep, that's what the game is. when you're doing Hell Tides, Nightmare Dungeons, pit runs, it's just all going to be about farming up material for re-rolling, which is called enchanting, right? The re-rolls, tempering, masterworking. That's what the game's going to be all about. Just getting the damn materials. So yeah, I don't know. I'll give season 4 a chance. Barbarian is still a pain in the ass to play. Whirlwind as a build seems like it sucks, but there'll be other builds to follow and shit to do. And honestly, the graphics of this game are still better than the competitors. I played Last Epoch enough just to understand the crafting system and how Diablo is going to adjust and react to it. Basically, in Last Epoch, you have more control over the 4 affixes that an item will get, and then items they can have between 4 and 6 affixes, and then there's ways to like mash items together, like mash the uniques onto other things. Honestly, the other guys explain it way better. My point of view here is simply the previous systems of Diablo 4 were not enjoyable. They had a lot of problems in terms of how things interacted with the inventories, how you had to always look through all of your yellows, comparing all 4 affixes for the yellows, the difficulty of like getting the affixes that you wanted on a chest piece, right? A 4 out of 4 or a 3 out of 4, where there's 38 possibilities on a chess piece. And even if you got a 3 out of 4 and then tried to roll for the 4th, just very, very tough. And then the stash space issues of having to save aspects. And I was at a point where I would extract if I had the legendary that had the aspect that I wanted and I didn't want the legendary, yeah, okay, I'll just extract it and I'll keep the aspect. And now I've got an inventory full of aspects rather than an inventory full of legendaries. So hopefully in this new build, you basically won't have to keep anything other than the gear that you're wearing. That's the ideal state. The ideal state of a game like this is the gear that you're wearing is what matters, and then you hang on to uniques, and then uniques enable different types of builds that you might want to re-gear for. That's how it's supposed to work, and there should be enough flexibility for you to experiment with different builds. If you get interesting uniques that you want to build around, you should be able to change your build easily enough, and you should have a base set of gear that should be good enough to try different builds out with. So I'm hoping that the first 3 affixes on a legendary give enough flexibility and general power that you don't have to have a different set of 3, that you can just temper the 4th and 5th affix, change out your aspects, and then you're good to go with another build based on changing the skill tree, changing the Paragon board, changing the 4th and 5th affix, and changing your legendary powers. That should be enough with your base gear to try any build you want, and the cost for that shouldn't be so prohibitive that you need to grind for a week to be able to cycle through builds, right? If you're playing the game and enjoying the game, you should just be collecting a whole bunch of materials so that you can mess around and experiment as you see fit, right? I mean, otherwise, what's the point? Diablo 4, more so than any other game I've played, plays you, right? Plays you for a fool for the most part, especially in the previous system where, what am I doing? I'm just grinding Nightmare Dungeons to level my glyphs, and then what? At least now you can kind of look at it like, okay, I have a goal of getting to 100. On the way to 100, I will do Nightmare Dungeons to level up all of the glyphs that I care about to max level 21. And then once I hit 100, I have the ability to continuously tinker with my gear through the master, what is it called? Tempering and master working. Yeah, so I'll be able to continuously tinker with my gear through masterworking and tempering and experiment with other builds thanks to the changes to the Codex of Power with the Occultist. That's kind of the key takeaway. I think the changes are good. I don't know if it's enough for me to want to sink another 200 hours into a new Barbarian. That'll totally depend on how enjoyable the leveling experience is in the new season, right? So, anyway, lots of ramblings, but this is, kind of nice to have D4 back. The PTR is cool. Level 100 boost is cool. Check it out. Experiment with builds. Report bugs if you see them. But, I'll probably just play more StarCraft anyway. So, thanks, guys. Take care.